Pakistan felt that we had suffered a military defeat at the hands of China, that the Indian leadership was weak because Jawaharlal Nehru had passed away in May 64. After that, Lal Bahadur Shastri. So they felt that India's weak at the political leadership.
So this war was triggered by Pakistan when they had done Operation Gibraltar in August of 1965.
If you look back in time, it was triggered much earlier in the Rann of Kutch, what we call Desert Hawk. So that's where it started. Then it moved to the area of Kargil. And after this failed, they launched Operation Grand Slam on 6th of September, the day that India crossed Dograhi and captured Dograhi.
What was it like in 1965?
In this camp of non-alignment. But Pakistan got more aid from America at that time. Post 65, Pakistan went the China way and we went the Soviet way. What did they do? They promoted their chief, made him a field marshal. And they started twisting the narrative that India asked for a ceasefire. This is their game. This is their way they do it. This is the narrative they do. They twist facts to portray their own thing.
September 2025 marks 60 years since the 1965 India-Pakistan War, a conflict that tested India's willpower, stretched its strategy, and reshaped South Asia's balance of power. From the deserts of the Rann of Kutch, the bloody capture and recapture of Dograhi, this was not just a war of tanks and trenches, but of alliances, propaganda, and national resolve. In this episode of Dive for Publisher, we sit down with Major General Jagatbir Singh, one of India's foremost military historians and a voice of authority at the United Services Institution. He takes us beyond the headlines of 1965 into the strategic missteps, the moments of grit, and geopolitical echoes that continue to shape India's security environment today. If you have ever wondered what really happened in 1965, why it mattered, and what lessons India must carry forward as we look towards 2047, this is a conversation you wouldn't want to miss. So, without further ado, let's get started. Jagatbir, welcome again. Dive for Publishers. Honor always to have a conversation with you.
Lovely being with you once again, Shivam, and I thank you for calling me to this platform and to discuss an issue which is of, relevance today.
So today's discussion is going to be about, as suggested by you, is going to be about the 1965 war because we are coming down to 60 years of
Absolutely. September marks 60 years of the 1965 conflict. So I felt it was the appropriate time to discuss this conflict.
So this war was triggered by Pakistan when they had done Operation Gibraltar in August of 1965.
That's the impression everybody gets. It was triggered by Operation Gibraltar. But if you look back in time, it was triggered much earlier in the Rann of Kutch, which nobody talks about. And that was what we call Desert Hawk. So that's where it started. But if you look back, the roots of 1965 lay in 1962. So you have to connect the dots from 1962, then you come up to 1965. And why do I say the roots lay in 1962? Because you know what happened in 1962? We fought against China, or China invaded India. And we all know what happened to India at that time in the northern area, which is eastern Ladakh today, as well as in Arunachal Pradesh, which was known as Nephi in those days, where we suffered setbacks. So 1962 saw a change in the posture of the Indian Army post 1962, when large-scale raisings took place, but the threat at time was felt it would be mainly from China. So a lot of the formations were deployed towards the Chinese border from 1962 onwards. So Pakistan felt that we had suffered a military defeat at the hands of China, so we were weak. That was 1962. Post 1962. 1963, Pakistan handed over the Shaksgam Valley, which is in Gilgit-Baltistan, which is not theirs to hand over, part of disputed POJK to China. So the relations between China and Pakistan got close. Then after that, at that time, Pakistan was part of both the CENTO and Seato agreements, their military alliance, so to say. And they were, because of that, they were so-called the frontiers to fight communism, so they were being armed by America. So Pakistan had that time better military wherewithal than India. So they thought they're strengthened by these agreements. India suffered a defeat. They're friendly with China, by having handed over Shaksgam, and then they felt the last thing that the Indian leadership was weak. And why did they feel this? Because the Indian Prime Minister, who had been the Prime Minister right since independence, Jawaharlal Nehru, had passed away in May 64. And after that, the Prime Minister this time in 65 was Lal Bahadur Shastri. So they felt that India's weak at the political leadership level. So they felt that this is time again to bring the Kashmir issue back to the international limelight. But they started off by fomenting trouble in the area of the Rann of Kutch, and that's where they attacked a post called Sardar Post and earlier. So this is where the conflict took place. So the conflict took place in Kutch, then it moved to the area of Kargil, then there was a ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan, and that was brokered by the UK at that time, their Prime
And the
Minister
UN?
Harold Wilson through the UN. And after that, they launched Op Gibraltar because they thought they'd ferment, rebellion in Jammu and Kashmir. And that's how they do it again with proxies. But actually, they were backed by Pakistani army person. And after this failed, they launched Operation Grand Slam when they came into Chum. And following up that, India launched, Operation Riddle. India went and took the battle across to Pakistan on the western frontier. So that's exactly what happened. Operation Riddle followed by Operation.
Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a quick moment and ask for a favor. We noticed that 93% of you who watch our content regularly aren't subscribed yet. My promise to you is simple. If you hit that subscribe button, we'll keep working hard to bring thought provoking conversations, incredible guests, and the topics you really care about the most. It is practically free for you, but it makes a huge difference for us, helping us grow, reach more people, and bring even better content your way. Thank you for supporting. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video.
Nepal.
Operation Nepal.
Yeah.
So before we go ahead, just while you were speaking about the relationship between Pakistan and China, it occurred to me that Pakistan has always been very tactical and strategic when it comes to uh, bringing out strategies with our neighborhood, with India. They have materialized quote that is, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. What is your take on that, sir? This is
You see, Pakistan has always played this game and they've played it right from independence. Right from independence, they have, everybody talks of Pakistan being a failed state or about to be a failed state, which has never happened. It's not failed till date. And they've taken advantage of two, three things. So the first thing they've taken advantage is they've taken advantage of their geostrategic location. So their geostrategic location makes them, one side is Iran and West Asia. The other side is the Central Asian republics. And the third side, they have China. So everybody feels at that time, post independence, the biggest threat the West felt was from communism. And they felt that Pakistan would, act as a buffer against communism. So that's why they were part of these two treaties, CENTO and Seattle. So you had Pakistan being there. So the West was investing in them to do this. But in spite of being friendly with the West, and in spite of the West knowing that, Pakistan was the country which was the closest friend, had very close friendship with China. And this started post 1963, which I talked to you about. So that's another thing. And now that friendship has just grown and strengthened and has become multifaceted. So today, when we talk of, two fronts, actually is one consolidated, front you're facing between China and Pakistan. And China has invested heavily in Pakistan in, CPEC and all. So today, They are making overtures to US, but yet they're friendly with China. So getting back into history, since you talked about this, if you look back at in time, I talked of 1963. In 1970 till 1971, China was US never recognized China, so to say. China was not part of the global system. So which when the choice came to reach out to China, there were very many intermediaries who, tried to do that. And now who would, tie it up? So there were three choices. One was through France. The second was through Romania. That time leadership was Ceausescu. It was through him. Or the third was through Pakistan. China finally said that all the talk has to be through Pakistan. So when you go back 1971, before the war, when Kissinger came to Delhi, when the genocide was there in Bangladesh, refugees here, and he came to Delhi and he met Mrs. Gandhi here, and the leadership next day he flew to Pakistan. And that's when he said, I have a stomach problem. And there was a decoy convoy which took him and his, entourage, so called decoys, to Murray to rest for 2 days, whereas actually he was flown to from Chakala to Moscow when he had not to Beijing, where he met with Chow Enlai and set the stage for the meeting between Richard Nixon and Chairman Mao in March 72. So throughout 71, when the war was on, when everything, their focus was friendship with Pakistan because they never wanted anything else to, for them, the larger picture was overall friendship with China. So this is a fact that you have to live with. This is a fact we have to contend with Pakistan. And you've seen what's happened post Sindoor. Post Sindoor, what has happened? Everyone, before that, you just look back in time. 9/11, the biggest attack on America. Everyone thought, what is going to happen? He was threatened, President Musharraf, that whose side are you on? So when you take the war, global war against terrorism, everybody looking for Osama bin Laden, and where is he found? Abbottabad, next to the military academy of Pakistan. So Pakistan played that game that time. Now post Sindoor, what do you see? General Muneer being promoted to Field Marshal, General Muneer being dined, having lunch with President Trump. Today, the statement is coming out that the BLA is, a terrorist organization. He went to attend the retirement ceremony of the Central Command Chief, Admiral Kuruvilla. I mean, these are things that are
And he
happening.
also said,
And they've got their money from IMF, they've got the money from World Bank. So uh, they are, and have they broken any friendship with China? No. So they're close friends with China. They're warming up to US, and that's the game they play. They always try to, do this. So you've seen this earlier also, and they always try to deny what they've done. Right from 65, you've seen this pattern. Like you said, Gibraltar. Yes, Gibraltar was there, but Gibraltar, uh, before Gibraltar, 47, 48, again Lashkars had come in. Now also the Pakistan army was there. 1999 also we saw the Pakistan army occupying posts in the unheld areas in Kargil. So the proxy war in the 90s, after that, even today. So I mean, this is continuing. This trait of theirs is continuing. They'll do this.
you just mentioned about the current geopolitical dynamics. What was it like in 1965? What were the the allies and the adversaries at that time for India? And did we have anyone standing behind us?
No, ultimately, at that time, we were what you call very firmly in this camp of non-alignment. So we said we're non-aligned. At that time, till 65, we were getting a lot of aid and all from America. But Pakistan got more aid from America at that time. At that time, we had not switched to American equipment. But post 65, you see a clearly defining line because America then put sanctions. The West put sanctions on both India and Pakistan at that time. So we had equipment from UK, we had equipment from France, we had equipment from the US. So we had that. But post 65, Pakistan went the China way and we went the Soviet way. So till that time, we were, looking, we were mainly non-aligned. We were non-aligned, so to say.
But what was the geopolitical landscape like at, during 1965 war?
The geopolitical landscape I've just talked to you about, you see, I told you about the West that time was obsessed with communism. They never wanted communism to spread. They were worried about the spread of communism. And at that time, in 65, America was very firmly aligned with the Seattle and CENTO. Iran was very much part of, Iran and Iraq were very much part of the US side that time. So, I mean, things were different.
Hmm. What was the leadership?
And as far as India was concerned, yes, we were friendly with the Soviet Union at that time. They had invested a lot in India over the years, particularly Khrushchev. But uh, we weren't into a military, buying a lot of military equipment at that time. Yeah.
From the Soviets.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the leadership traits like? Who were some big leaders and big decisions from these leaders during the
You
war?
see, during the war, you should look at your own leadership. No? And your own leadership was the Prime Minister that time, Lal Bahadur Shastri, the Defense Minister that time, Y.B. Chauhan. These were your two main leaders at that time who were for the political level. At the military level, where you come down to the military level, you had the army chief, General J.N. Chaudhary, Mochu Chaudhary as he's known as. So he was the army chief and he was responsible for the transition which had taken place post 62 to 65 of the army. So the transition that had taken place that time. But as far as the command goes, the major command that was involved in the war at that time was Western Command. And Western Command that time and what Western Command is today, their boundaries and all differ, but the war was fought mainly on the Western Front. And the Western Command that time was commanded by Lieutenant General Harbakh Singh, who was legendary, and everybody knows a lot about him and what he did and how, he himself had fought as a young officer in Malaya. Then he fought in 1947-48 in Jammu and Kashmir, J&K, and later on he was, the officiating corps commander made the corps commander for a short time. I won't use the word officiating. When BM Call was in hospital, he came in as the corps commander in 4 Corps in the northeast that time in Tezpur, till BM Call came back from hospital. There is a different matter as to why General BM Call was reinstated, were put back when he returned. And a lot of people say war would have been different as General Harbakh had continued as the corps commander of Corps at that time. And then he was the army commander on the Western Front at this time. So that was the leadership at that level. At the corps level, the two main corps that were involved were 15 Corps led by Lieutenant General K.S. Katoch and 11 Corps led by General J.S. Dhillon. And the corps that went for the offensive was a newly raised corps. So we raised a corps just before that in April or May 1965, which was one corps, which was the so-called strike corps. But the strike corps that time had only one armored division, one infantry division, and one mountain division. So there was one armored div, 6 mounted division, and 14 infantry division. And the armored div was commanded by Major General Rajan. The corps was commanded by Lieutenant General Patrick Dunn, and the armored div that time was commanded by Major General Rajendra Singh Sparrow, who was a MVC and got his second MVC here. Whereas the other two divisions were commanded by Major General Korla and General R.K. Ranjit Singh. So this was the offensive here. And down south, where you had the problem, southern Punjab, so to say, you had an offensive going in through 15 Div, which was that time commanded by Major Naranjan Prasad, who incidentally was the Div commander in 4 Div in 1962. And you know exactly what happened here. He had to be removed from command because of an issue at the Battle of DograI, which took place when three Jats crossed and they never gave them adequate support. And he was replaced by Major General Mahinder Singh. You had 4 Div commanded by Major General Gurbakh Singh, and then you had uh, Second Armored Brigade in the south, which was, in, responsible for the destruction of the Pakistani tanks at Asal Uttar. You had 7 Div commanded by Major General Sibbal. And I mean, this is the area of 11 Corps in the plains at that time where the bulk of the offensive took place.
So, what changes did you see? Do you see and do you recall from 1962 to 1965 that India took on different levels?
You see, at post 1965, 62, India started increasing the strength of the armed forces. So there were new raisings that took place, and a lot of focus was on raising towards the mountains, like I told you. So you started focusing towards the eastern front to a great degree, and you started building up your defenses over there. So this is what happened in 1962 to 1965. And also at that time, there were major exercises that took place to check your defense preparedness, to check the weaknesses in defense, including a air exercise Shiksha that took place in 1963, which was there. So, I mean, there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of infusion into manpower. There's a lot of infusion in raising. There's a lot of infusion of equipment. So, there was changes, and that is why we were able to hold our own, not to only hold our own, but we were able to destroy Pakistan's war waging capability in 1965. If our army was still as weak as it was, we had suffered a setback. I think we learned lessons from our setback and we got back to the drawing board in a, very systematic manner under our leadership at that time. And we were well prepared to meet Pakistan's challenge, which we met, and were able to destroy Pakistan's war waging capability at that time. So I think there's kudos to the military leadership at that time for pulling this off. And it was all under the army chief. And I told you about the army commander at that time, General Manik Shah, who people talk about. He was the Eastern Army commander in when 1965 took place.
Did he have a lot of role in
Well,
the combat?
I told you the role was mainly to
Western.
the west.
Hmm.
So, though if there was a role, I'm sure it would have been executed very well. One of the seeds of East Pakistan, of Bangladesh, was sown at that time because the East Pakistanis felt that they were being betrayed by the West Pakistanis, as they had very little in form of military defenses in case an Indian army offensive was launched into East Pakistan, because all the focus was on the Western front. In fact, Pakistan thought they would pull it off by, going into from Cham, and they'll cut off the road access and cut off Kashmir fully. But at the last moment, the 12 Div, which was tasked to do this, you must be well aware, Major Akhtar Hussain, I think, was the person over there.
The army chief.
Not the army chief, the Div commander. He was almost paused, and then he was replaced by General Yahya Khan, because Ayub Khan wanted his own man there to reap the glory, and Akhtar Hussain is a Ahmadiyya.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is something that is there. So, but India in 65 in that Cham sector did very well. And also what preceded that was a capture of the Haji Pass by uh, in Operation Bakshi, led by the brigade was 68 brigade commanded by that time Brigadier Zoru Bakshi, and the troops who carried this out was one para. That time the company was commanded by then Major, later Lieutenant General uh, Ranjit Dayal, who got a Mahavir Chakra for this. So, I mean, there are many heroic stories that come out, but I mean, you have to connect these.
Sir, just to lighten this conversation, I just want to understand how do you remember all these historical figures and these leaders and these dates and years?
No, only because of reading, nothing else. Yeah. Yeah.
What have you been reading lately, sir, when it comes to, if there was one book that you want to mention?
No, I'll read the book I'm reading lately, though it doesn't cover this war, but it's an interesting book. It's by Sam Dalrymple, Shattered Lines, and I suggest you must read that. Shivam, you'll enjoy it. But the other book I enjoyed reading was what your dad gave me on this India, China, and in the Asian century. Yeah, written by Mr. Balachandar. He gives a different insight into the problems and how there are certain things which he said even thinkers within India never connected as to, how Chairman Mao felt about India. So it's very good insight. And you must read that book. Yeah.
When it comes to history, sir, it's a lot about different narratives and different understanding of those truths that we see. If there was a book that you want to suggest to the audience to understand India's military history better, which book would that be, sir?
No, you can't get onto any one book to suggest to get understand military history better. Having been involved in, writing a book on military history, Armor 71, which so I'll tell you there are many, even if you write your own military history, you have the official history, you have the history, I mean, the individual accounts of a battle, and then you have people who are removed from that, who are writing, seeing both sides, and then you have the adversaries account. So there's no one book that you have to read. You have to read multiple books and then form your own opinion and then draw your own lessons because everybody focuses on something. Everybody focuses it from the manner in which they saw it and the manner in which they unveil.
Well said. So there's no one book that you should read to
But
understand.
you have to
military
read
history.
multiple books.
You
Yeah.
got to read multiple different perspectives and make your own
Yeah.
judgment. And that's what you need to do in life as well.
Yeah.
So just to draw parallels from 1965 to now in 2025, it's been 60 years. In Operation Sindoor, a lot of things changed. How we fight wars, how do we retaliate, how do we respond. But one thing remains constant is the importance of building narratives and having strategic communications.
Okay. So now, since you raised this, yeah, there's Clausewitz, talks of two things. He talks of the character and he talks of the nature
Nature.
of war. Now, nature of war is unchanged. Character of war has changed. The way we fought in 1965, the way we mobilized, the way we went across, how we went across. I mean, people are saying, will that be replicated again? The terrain has also changed to a large degree. The friction has
Technology.
terrain. The villages over there have become bigger. Small towns, villages, small villages have become bigger. Small towns have become bigger towns. The restriction has taken place in your movement, so you can't, spread out to that degree. In especially, I'm talking of the area of, you can say, where you went that time for the offensive with the Shaksgam Pulse. Your ISR has improved tremendously, so you'll be able to pick up things earlier. Your intelligence has improved, your standoff weaponry has improved, technology is coming to a large degree. But what remains, Shivam, is still that you're both uh, Siddur 65. Today, still J&K remains central. So they've again got this issue up of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, which is there. So these issues still remain unresolved as far as Pakistan is concerned. They're revisionist country. They're bringing it up time and time again. Post Sindoor, they've again tried to internationalize this issue, whereas it was to be a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan following the Simla Agreement of 1971. So that's one thing. And secondly, is look at the communication. You take 1965, they suffered defeat everywhere. They lost Hajipir. Their Gibraltar failed. Start with Gibraltar. Desert Hawk failed. Gibraltar failed. Hajipir they lost. Cham they were stopped. Indian troops went across at Chakargarh. The Battle of Philora, Battle of Chavinda, Bhutta Dongri, well known as to the damage and destruction the Pakistan army suffered. The Pakistan army tried to cross in the south in through the area of Hosseiniwala and not Hosseiniwala, Khemkaran. They were again stopped at Asaluttar. They were defeated over there. Yet the narrative they brought out is as if it was their victory. 6th of April, 6th of September, the day that India crossed uh, Dograhi and captured Dograhi, crossed the Ichagal, and then we were pulled back because I told you the follow on up was not there, and the GOC that time was replaced. They celebrated as Pakistan Defense Day, the victory at Lahore. I mean, so narrative is very important today also. You see how they changed how they played the narrative out post Operation Sindoor, and the more you look at it, it's so the first time he was interviewed, Khwaja, the defense minister of Pakistan, he started. Everybody talks of terrorism, but he started saying that we've been doing involved in terrorism because of the West from the beginning. We, as if they, it's it's not his problem; it's the problem of the West. As if it's not something wrong. He's been told to do this at somebody's behest. That's exactly what they started doing. And then they started pushing the narrative instead of terrorism, they started pushing the narrative of Kashmir on the world stage. During the war, the first thing, in spite of all the setbacks they had, in spite of all the damage done to them, in spite of their terrorist camps destroyed, what did they do? They promoted their chief, made him a field marshal. So Asim Munir is a field marshal. Then they're playing up the fact that, President Trump has called him. Then they started twisting the narrative that India asked for a ceasefire, where it's well documented and well known that the Pakistan DGMO, Raga Par DGMO, and asked for the ceasefire. So, I mean, this is their game. This is their way they do it. This is the narrative they do. They twist facts to portray their own thing and to make it in their advantage. So, that's exactly what they've been doing right from then. But we have to be careful because what happened at the end of 65 is you had the Tashkent Agreement and you gave away a lot of your areas you had gained. And same way in 71, you did the same. So you have to be careful when you negotiate with Pakistan post any conflict.
Back to 2025, sir, even after we did fairly when it comes to the communication, strategic communication, from in terms of what message we wanted to portray. We had facts and figures as well. Yet Pakistan had an edge, and in the coming years, in the future, we need to amp up our strategic communications as well. Do you agree, sir?
I agree with you absolutely. You said Pakistan had the edge, very true. Now, when it comes to strategic communication or when it comes to communication, I always say there are 2, 3 things you must remember. The first thing is the audience. Who are you communicating to? So you have one is your own audience, which is your domestic audience. That audience is already on your side. So your loudest communication is being made to your domestic audience who's already on your side. And while making communication to them, certain things you're misreporting. Like, why did you have to say that you bombed Karachi harbor? Why did your anchors have to say that? So
You can't control your media.
you can't control your media. So that's what I'm saying. So the first thing is your domestic audience. The second thing is how do you convey something to the adversarial audience? Like Pakistan's conveying to your audience. How do you convey to their audience? How do you convince the other country that they've done something that they've suffered? Like a lot of our people are convinced that your aircraft went down. So they're more convinced what Pakistan is saying rather than what your own air chief has to say. So that's the second thing. And the third audience, which is extremely important, is how do you deal with the international audience? How do you convince the international audience? How many of your people were on the think tank, were on the stage with the international think tanks, talking at Atlantic, talking at, similar Hudson Institute, talking at Carnegie? How many of you were there? Pakistan over the years has cultivated people to speak their language in the West. Have you done it? You have to write articles, you have to put articles in their papers, which are the opinion papers. You have to speak over there, you have to talk over there. So, I mean, all this has to be done. So, what did you do? When you realized that you were on the, they had the edge, you sent out a parliamentary delegation to all these countries. The parliamentary delegation was very well selected as far as the parliamentarians were concerned, very well selected as far as your diplomats were concerned, but there were no military person on any of the delegations. So who's going to give the military viewpoint on these delegations? You should have had
Hmm.
that also. So, I mean, this is something you have to think about. So, we did a step to rectify of thing, but we had to go a step forward. So, you have to have a mixture of diplomats, parliamentarians, academicians, and military people, retired military people who can spread your narrative.
Like yourself. You recently wrote a monograph on the subject of strategic communication.
Yeah, I wrote it for the USI. I've written
There's some
paper.
points that you brought out as well. If you want to add one, like each on the five that I have in front of me.
Yeah, tell me.
We first is about how we need to create a dedicated strategic communication unit within the MOD and Ministry of External Affairs, that the team should coordinate messaging across all.
Absolutely. You see, it has to be a whole nation approach. You cannot work in silos. So you have to have a whole nation approach towards this. And you have to have, I said, mixture of people from across all walks of life. Then only you'll get the message across in the correct manner that you want it to get across. And your messaging also has to be credible,
And consistent.
consistent and credible.
Second point that you mentioned was that we need to develop clear communication protocols for different conflict scenarios, ensuring rapid responses and unified messaging.
Absolutely. So you have to have something which is there. Say there's a terrorist attack. How do you respond to that? What do you say? The language has to be the same. You have to have consistency, credibility right from there. If there's something has happened, you have to be able to say, yes, this has happened and this is why it's happened and this is then. But we move on from there. Now, nobody is telling you to say the first day that, ABC has happened and where it's happened and how it's happened. But you've seen you see, I'm telling you the reason why this has to be there. You would have heard a statement by various people when they said we took pains to ensure that the damage caused, the images were available to prove it. Why was this said? Because in Balakot, we could not back what we said with photographic evidence to that degree. So you see the importance today. These entire operations were based on, to a degree, on the ability to communicate your message after carrying out the operation. So this is
How does Pakistan undergo such unified messaging?
Pakistan has had from the beginning a setup called the ISPR, which even predates the ISI. So, and the military over there is in control of everything, and the ISPR is a very powerful body. So, Pakistan coordinates this their thing through the ISPR, and you can go onto the website, you'll read all about the ISPR. Lot of their, after any strike, anything that happens, any issue, incident in Pakistan, the first spokesman of theirs is from the the first statement comes out from the ISPR. As far as India goes, we got into this much later with the ADGI PI, and today is known as DG Strategic Communication. But we got into it at a later time frame.
Very strong messaging when it comes to the psychological aspect of any message that DGISPR
Yep.
throws out.
Yeah.
The third that you speak about, that we must invest in a public diplomacy training for officials to engage both domestic and international audience actively.
Yeah. That is there. So they must be aware of, what is happening. It's happening here. But the spokesman has to go out, talk to people, and we have to. You saw this time, it was a step in the right direction. You had the foreign secretary talking, and he was flanked by two people who represented the services, two lady officers, one from the army, one from the air force, giving out the narrative. But they were only able to speak to a level. The following time, you had the DGMOs come up and speak. Now, they had different, background, and their level of communication was at a much higher level. So, you realize that now there's a limit to which a spokesman can take it on and a minute to which somebody in authority can take it on. So, I mean, the things are happening. I'm not saying they're not happening. I'm saying there's a huge change which has taken place from Balakot onward. But we need to be ahead of the game and we need to target the international audience more.
Fourth is, which you already mentioned, but I want to understand from you the importance of building partnerships with global media and digital platforms to enhance India's narratives and
Yeah,
our
so
reach.
that's exactly what I told you. So, what are your global partnerships? You need to have partnerships and talk on their TV shows, on their where their opinion makers are. You have to have be part of their, international conferences. Air your views over there. You have to be part of global think tanks, whether you write for them, whether you speak in there, be part of their webinars, whether you're part of their discussions. So all this matters because those are people who affect the opinion makers, the decision makers. So these people are there and they, talk to the decision makers and the decision makers rely on their opinion. So, I mean, that's how it flows.
Wo-
Next, you have to go to the international media. You have to start writing in international press, in international papers, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I mean, similar sort of papers which are guardian. I mean, where people will take your viewpoint, understand it.
How do you look at how this time around the Western media was asking difficult questions from Pakistani officials?
The Western media always plays to their own interests and their own thing. Western media ask difficult questions, but what do they do? About it? Today, the Western media is looking at Ukraine with a different lens, looking at Gaza with a different lens. Unfortunately, the Western media looks at every conflict from a different lens. They look at every country from a different lens. So that's something, are they absolutely correct in their reporting? The answer is no. So they'll ask a difficult question, but are they calling the bluff? No.
Hmm. The fifth point that you brought out was to integrate real-time monitoring and fact-checking tools to counter misinformation quickly, which we are
Yeah,
lacking
you
from.
see, this is something which is misinformation is damaging. And as I gave that example of what happened in about the attack at Karachi Harbor, which actually never took place. So, I mean, these sort of things. So then people, if you give wrong information somewhere, whether it's your, official media or your independent media, what correct information you're giving, people wouldn't believe that.
Hmm.
So that's where back to what you said, Shivam, credibility, consistency and credibility.
Lastly, we must prioritize transparency and consistency in messaging, like you said,
Exactly.
as that builds long-term credibility. Like you said, these steps can strengthen India's strategic communication foundation over time. Is there any point that you want to add, sir?
So I think there's been a superb interaction with you, Shivam. You've really brought out a lot and you've connected how 1965 and Sindoor, the two things. And the main issue you brought out is, that how the narrative has to be consistent, clear, uh, and credible, and how Pakistan is always trying to portray things differently to than what they are on ground. Thanks.
This has been a lovely conversation with you on the Diamond Jubilee of the 1965 war, which we both the parties claim to have the victory over. And again, thank you so much for your time, sir, and an insightful conversation. I'm sure the audience had a lot of takeaways.
Thank you, but it's a clear cut victory as far as India was concerned.
Jai Hind.